Hello, everyone. Sasha is back to share a truly captivating true story. Without further ado, let's dive into it. This film is titled Hacksaw Ridge. It's based on the true story of a World War II hero named Desmond Doss, who went to war without ever carrying a weapon. Honestly, when I first watched this, I was completely amazed and deeply moved by Desmond's convictions. Alright, let's get into the story. The film begins by showing Desmond's childhood. He was very close to his older brother, Hal. The two of them spent their days playing and adventuring through the forests near their home. Desmond's father was a retired soldier who had fought in World War I. Though he survived the war and returned home, all his friends had died. This experience left him deeply scarred, and he became a heavy drinker, unable to forget the horrors of war. His father, once a gentle and loving man, turned into someone angry and volatile, tormented by memories of watching his childhood friends die in front of him. One day, a young Desmond got into a fight with Hal. In a fit of rage, Desmond grabbed a large rock and struck his brother. Hal was critically injured and nearly died. This shocked Desmond to his core, as he had almost killed the brother he loved so much. Looking around the house in despair, Desmond's eyes fell upon a picture of the 7 deadly sins hanging on the wall. One sin, in particular, struck him deeply, the sin of murder. Desmond felt as though he had received a spiritual awakening. Thankfully, Hal recovered. From that moment on, Desmond vowed never to harm another person again. Fast forward to adulthood, Desmond grew into a deeply religious man. He devoted himself to his faith and worked tirelessly at his local church, following every commandment and teaching, especially the one forbidding killing. This principle remained crystal clear in his mind. One day, while cleaning the church, Desmond witnessed a serious car accident just outside. He immediately rushed to help. The victim was bleeding profusely, so Desmond used his belt as a makeshift tourniquet to slow the blood loss. The injured man was taken to the hospital, where doctors were able to save him. One of the doctors praised Desmond for his quick thinking, saying, "You saved his life." These words deeply resonated with Desmond. They stood in stark contrast to the guilt he had carried from his near-fatal fight with Hal. Now, instead of taking a life, he had saved one. While at the hospital, Desmond met a beautiful nurse who completely captivated him. He was so smitten that he started visiting the hospital every day just to see her. He eventually worked up the courage to ask her out, and the two began dating. Through their relationship, Desmond learned about medicine and anatomy from his new girlfriend. She lent him medical books, and he studied them diligently. One day, during breakfast with his family, Hal emerged from his room dressed in a military uniform. He announced that he had enlisted to serve in World War II. The family was stunned, especially their father, who broke down in tears. Haunted by his own memories of war, their father feared losing his son in the same way he had lost his friends. Overcome with grief, he angrily ordered Hal to leave. Despite his father's protests, Hal departed to serve. Seeing his brother leave stirred something within Desmond. He felt a growing call to serve his country as well, even though he didn't want to fight. Eventually, Desmond made the decision to enlist. Unlike Hal, however, he chose to join as a combat medic, as he refused to take a life, even that of an enemy. Before leaving, Desmond proposed to his girlfriend. She accepted, and on the day of his departure, she gave him a Bible with her photo tucked inside, so he would always remember his faith and her waiting for him at home. Upon arriving at boot camp, Desmond met his fellow soldiers, who would become his team in the field. At first, everything seemed fine. Desmond got along with his teammates, his sergeant, and even his commanding officers. During training, the soldiers practiced tying rope knots for climbing steep cliffs, a skill they would need on the battlefield. Most of the soldiers mastered the exercise, but Desmond made a mistake. His knot had 2 loops, which the others jokingly said looked like a woman's bra. Despite this embarrassment, Desmond excelled in other challenges, even finishing first in an obstacle course. However, things took a turn during firearms training. When it was his turn, Desmond refused to pick up a rifle. He explained that his religion forbade him from taking another person's life. This shocked everyone, including his commander. Desmond apologized repeatedly, but stood firm in his decision, refusing to compromise his beliefs. This decision led to ridicule and punishment. Desmond was ordered to clean latrines, run extra laps, and endure various forms of discipline. His comrades began to resent him, seeing his refusal to carry a weapon as selfish and a liability. One night, they took their frustration out on him, beating him severely. The next morning, when his commander saw Desmond's bruised and battered face, he asked who had attacked him. Desmond, however, protected his team. He claimed he had simply fallen out of bed, even though he had been viciously assaulted. Despite the abuse, Desmond remained steadfast in his faith and his commitment to serve as a medic. When his commander urged him to quit and return home, Desmond refused. He was determined to fulfill his duty without compromising his beliefs. The military authorities couldn't discharge Desmond from service without proper cause. To remove a soldier from the army, they had to go through official processes like a military court. They couldn't just do it arbitrarily. As a result, Desmond was temporarily imprisoned in a military jail, charged with insubordination for refusing to carry a weapon. Because of this, Desmond couldn't take leave for his wedding, which was supposed to happen with the woman he deeply loved. Frustrated and heartbroken, Desmond felt helpless as his wedding plans fell apart. Following orders from his commander, Desmond's fiancée visited him in prison. She tried to persuade him to let go of his stubbornness and follow the orders to carry a weapon. But Desmond stood firm in his beliefs. Although outwardly defiant, Desmond was struggling internally. He wasn't sure if what he was doing was right or wrong, but his heart guided him to remain steadfast in his convictions. He felt torn on one hand. He wanted to obey God's commands, but on the other, the relentless challenges tested his resolve. To be honest, even I initially thought, why doesn't he just carry the weapon for formality's sake? He doesn't have to use it in the actual war. But okay, let's respect Desmond's decision. Finally, the day of the military court hearing arrived. The trial would determine whether Desmond would be discharged from the military or allowed to continue serving. During the trial, Desmond was cornered by accusations from 3 commanders who claimed he had disobeyed direct orders and acted as an opponent of the war. But Desmond strongly asserted that he was neither against the war nor a traitor to his country. "I want to save lives, not take them," Desmond declared with conviction. The military judge listened intently to Desmond's words, moved by his unwavering stance. But rules are rules, and in the military, orders must be followed. Personal beliefs cannot take precedence over orders from superiors. At the peak of tension, Desmond's father, a veteran of World War I, entered the courtroom. He carried a letter from a senior military commander, stating that Desmond's decision to serve as a medic was lawful. The letter emphasized that his refusal to carry a weapon wasn't a personal whim, but a matter of religious conviction. The document also cited constitutional protections for religious freedom, making it clear that Desmond's choice wasn't a violation of military law. After the letter was read aloud, a sense of relief filled the room. Even Desmond's commanders, who had initially opposed him, were visibly moved. Though they had filed charges against him, they respected his principles. The letter gave them a way to allow Desmond to stay in the military without feeling like they had compromised their authority. In the end, Desmond was allowed to continue serving. Moreover, he was granted leave to finally marry his fiancée. After his wedding, the training phase concluded, and it was time for Desmond and his unit to face the real battlefield against the Japanese forces. Back then, in World War II, advanced technology hadn't yet dominated warfare. The outcome of battles often depended on the mental fortitude of the soldiers. The Japanese army was infamous for its ferocity. Soldiers were known to commit suicide by carrying grenades into enemy lines to take down as many opponents as possible. Hearing these stories shook the morale of the American troops. Their fears only worsened when they saw trucks carrying the bodies of fallen soldiers passing by. The sight of these casualties deeply unsettled them. Finally, the soldiers arrived at the battlefield, a steep cliff known as Hacksaw Ridge. This location gave the film its name. The ridge was as daunting as its reputation. The soldiers climbed the cliff, and what awaited them at the top was pure chaos. Let me tell you, watching this scene in the movie had my heart racing. It felt so real, as if we, the audience, were right there in the middle of the war. Explosions sent bodies flying, leaving soldiers in gruesome conditions. Some were torn in half, their intestines spilling out. Others lost limbs, arms, legs. Everywhere you looked, it was carnage. Honestly, if I were to describe it all in detail, this video might get blocked on YouTube. Desmond, serving as a medic, tirelessly helped and carried wounded soldiers to safety. What's even more incredible is that many of those he saved were the same comrades who had trained with him back in the military camp, the same ones who had once mocked and bullied him. While other medics stayed behind the front lines, Desmond went straight into the heat of battle, putting himself in extreme danger. Unarmed and defenseless, Desmond narrowly avoided being shot multiple times by Japanese soldiers. At this point, all grudges and prejudices had vanished. The comrades who had once ridiculed Desmond for his beliefs now worked alongside him, protecting and supporting each other. In fact, Desmond became the team's lifeline. If he died, the frontline soldiers would have no one to tend to their injuries, leaving them with little hope of survival. I've kept it unabridged, with punctuation for emphasis. One of Desmond's fellow soldiers, who was well known in their unit, suffered a devastating injury that left both his legs completely shattered. A medic nearby suggested that Desmond simply give him some painkillers and leave, as his condition was beyond saving. The medic believed the soldier was already as good as dead. But Desmond refused. He didn't want to abandon him. Instead, he carried the injured soldier back to safety, insisting to the other medics that they should still try to save him. He will survive, Desmond said firmly. After bringing him to safety, Desmond returned to the battlefield again and again, rescuing others. As night fell, the darkness forced everyone to retreat temporarily, halting the fighting for the night. While others took shelter and rested, Desmond chose to head back to the front lines to rescue more wounded soldiers who were still trapped. Once he felt he had done enough for the night, Desmond found a place to rest and shared a personal story with one of his comrades. He explained why he had never wanted to hold a weapon. Desmond said that the commandment against killing was rooted in his faith, but his decision not to carry a weapon was not a religious mandate. It was a personal choice. He shared a painful memory from his childhood. Desmond's father, often drunk, would abuse him and his brother. Despite enduring this violence, Desmond held on to his belief in nonviolence and forgiveness. Morning came, and with it, disaster. Thousands of Japanese soldiers launched a surprise attack, emerging from underground tunnels. Their sheer numbers overwhelmed the American troops, forcing them to retreat toward the edge of Hacksaw Ridge. In the chaos, many soldiers were killed or injured. Among the casualties were Desmond's comrades, men he had trained with and known personally. Desmond watched in horror, torn between running to safety or staying to help the wounded. At that moment, Desmond turned to God. He prayed, asking for guidance and strength. "Lord, what do you want me to do? I can't hear you." Determined to help, Desmond chose to stay behind. He returned to the battlefield alone, rescuing as many soldiers as he could, one by one. At the edge of the ridge, Desmond faced another challenge. He couldn't lower the injured men to safety by himself. So, he used a rope to create a makeshift harness. Ironically, the knot he tied was the same one his comrades had mocked during training, calling it a woman's bra. But now, that knot was saving lives. Desmond secured each injured soldier with the rope and carefully lowered them down the cliff. Down below, soldiers on guard were stunned. They saw injured men being lowered one after another, but they had no idea who was doing it. Even the commanders, who had retreated to the base, were distraught. They knew many of their men were still trapped on the ridge, but felt powerless to save them. One commander, overcome with frustration, tried contacting reinforcements. However, they wouldn't arrive until the next day. Meanwhile, Desmond remained on the battlefield, playing a deadly game of hide-and-seek with the Japanese soldiers. He continued rescuing his comrades, even venturing into the Japanese tunnels. Desmond didn't just save his own men, he also helped an injured Japanese soldier. For Desmond, it wasn't about sides, it was about saving lives. Through the night, Desmond worked tirelessly, all alone. As the hours dragged on, the soldiers down below began to realize the magnitude of his actions. By morning, the commander was stunned. He discovered that many of his men, whom he thought were lost, had been rescued and were now receiving medical treatment. When he asked who was responsible, the soldiers told him it was Desmond. He saved us, all by himself. The commander was speechless. He had always dismissed Desmond as a skinny, stubborn idealist who hid behind his religious beliefs. But now, he realized he had misjudged him. Desmond had proven himself to be a true hero. Desmond finally descended from the ridge, exhausted but alive. The soldiers and commanders were in awe of what he had accomplished. No one could believe that a single man, unarmed, had done so much. They regarded him not just as a comrade, but as a savior. In the final scenes of the story, Desmond's fellow soldiers prepared to return to the battlefield, but they refused to go back up the ridge without him. They believed that with Desmond by their side, God would protect them. As they waited for him to pray for their safety, the film drew to a close.